on video now?
Well, we're not.
Yeah. Your video's playing. Pretty. Anything I should know?
Our audio is on.
All right.
So hello, everybody. Yeah, our audio is always on when that video's on. I forgot to mention we usually just like stay real quiet during it. So here we are for episode 66. It's been a little hectic in this last couple of minutes to get everything set up. But we are all here, and you are here. We just gave you extra time to get logged in to watch everything. As we get on today to talk about the Depths board game, we have with us Max of CSE notoriety to talk about the game and answer our questions. We're also, of course, going to be open to all of your questions as well about the board game. Not really about CU itself. We're going to try to keep it focused on three main topic areas: just learning the game itself, things that have been said about it, things that the game itself, how it's supposed to be played, all of that. Just development of the board game, how that goes, and what's entailed in that kind of work, and other speculative future stuff, some things about how it ties into CU, and so on for the last part. We are going to try to keep this episode at around our normal time because I know Max has stuff to do after this. Just so I can keep track, what time do you have to hop off?
Oh, I've got plenty of time. I probably at least an hour, and we can go over if we have to.
Okay, cool. I just didn't want to keep you too long. So, in that case, welcome everybody, and welcome Max. Just collecting myself for a minute here, having to switch back and forth.
Take your time.
I'm excited to be here for this one because we had a Max on previously with a lore stream. Over a year ago, I think. And
that was a while back.
So.
Yep, and you were
good to have you back.
I don't remember why you were AWOL, but you were
working.
Yeah,
that's right. You were still at that job.
Yeah, that's true.
Work tends to do that.
Yeah.
So, I guess we can go ahead and get started then. Everybody's kind of waited for us for a while here, so we'll go ahead and get started. So let's start with the game itself, and just, if we can, in general terms for those of us who might not know already, because I know you have talked about the board game and done some play tests and things of that nature, but since we may have people that don't know, what is the Depths board game and how does it play?
Alrighty. The Depths board game is a 1 versus X card battling board game set in the depths, in the world of Camelot Unchained, the living dungeon, the RVR dungeon of Camelot Unchained. It is a separate game. It's not meant to kind of copy the video game Camelot Unchained or anything like that. It is its own thing, and it is coming along great. Let's see what else about the game. It's kind of a beer and pretzels game. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but it plays fast. It's meant to play fast, and it's meant to play dramatically. So one player takes on the role of a monster, some delver who has been transformed by corruption of the depths into a Lovecraftian or H.R. Gigerian horror, and attempts to devour the other players who are all delvers of the depths. And in order to, and it's known as the Servant of the Depths. And in order to do so, in order to do battle, everyone gets a deck of cards. So the cards in that deck are determined by your choice of race and class, or race and archetype. And you basically shuffle those together, and that's your character creation, kind of a light deck building thing. And you'll use those cards. You combine them to unleash terrifically powerful attacks. You'll utilize the terrain, the constantly shifting terrain of the depths, as it is a living place of horror and malevolent will. And it is generally trying to help the Servant of the Depths, but it's a tricky thing, and you can never quite know what's going to happen. So even if you play on the same board, the game will always be different, but it'll always be, or usually be, pretty fun and exciting as you attempt to win. So good guys win solo, bad guys win together.
Okay. I want to remember there. I know through development you go through different iterations of things, and I want to remember originally there being like different scenarios or something. Is that still a part of it, or is it kind of refined more into
like one of the player was becoming the monster in the process of the game, rather than directly starting as a monster?
Great question. So I actually talked a bit about the history of the development of the board game in the presentation that we published at the end of last year, in December of last year. Originally, through several iterations, the game was a very long, extended kind of affair that took hours to play. And in that sort of, I don't want to call it the full version because that implies that it's the real version, but it's in that earlier version of the game. You all started out together in this kind of uncomfortable alliance, and then you all got more and more corrupted as time went on until someone transformed into the monster, and then you would go to like the final area. And it would change from an uncomfortable cooperative game, to a 1 versus X game. And so essentially, Mark, after playing a couple times, like, Max, why don't you just make and test the final battle game? Because that's the funnest part. Why not that we might do something with the rest of the game as it existed previously. I mean, it's still designed, it still exists in my notes, but the best part of the game is the game as it stands now. So it's just the good stuff, the boss fight. Without the kind of adventuring through the depths and going over multiple boards part of it, which again we might do something with in the future, but for now focused on just the best stuff.
Was there any inspiration from other games to focus more on that aspect that you utilize to pull it? Because I know there are games that are Monster versus X, like Evolve.
That's the one I was thinking about. Yeah.
I mean, Evolve's really cool. A little bit of Evolve, I guess, just in the sense, but really only in the sense of, somebody gets to play as the monster, which isn't, I think, as unusual in board games as it is in video games. Cool. Thanks. I'm glad you agree.
Oh yeah, I've played a Cylon in the Battlestar Galactica board game, so there's plenty of board games where you can play bad guys.
Yeah, there you go. So basically, in terms of board game inspiration, Well, there's the Dark Souls board game that came out not too long ago. And that also was really cool, but also criticized for it not being as much fun to do a kind of to replay the same thing over and over again with friends as it is to do alone in a Dark Souls game. So a lot of people kind of would just skip kind of like modify the game to just skip to the good stuff. So in that sense, I was like, yeah, that seems like a good idea.
I feel like that's a frequent part of board game development anyway, is coming up with an idea and then you get into play testing and you go, this part is not as fun as I thought it would be, and it takes it adds like an hour to the play time just like this one portion of the game, and if we shaved that off or simplified it, everything would run a lot more smoothly.
That's something I've learned, in designing this game, I think, which has been really interesting experience.
I mean,
you had no experience.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just asking. You had no experience developing or participating in the development of a board game before?
I had a little bit, but nothing that got this far.
Okay.
Another thing, we were talking about time. Another thing that adds time is the sheer number of players in any kind of board game. And I got the privilege to test with Max a while back, and it was just you and me, Max, doing that. I know things have changed a lot since then. What would you say is kind of the good number to play this with friends once they had access to it?
So some people say that you shouldn't say what the sweet spot is in terms of number of players, because then it sounds like, well, then people aren't going to want to play if they only have a certain number. So the game will, but I disagree, because I hate it when rule books don't tell me that. I think it should be in every rule book. Like, yeah, the game can play this many to this many, but the sweet spot, the best number, is right in here. So that's my philosophy, so I'm going to stick to that. The game still plays pretty well with one-on-one game. We had a really good battle brand, you and I. Do I call you by your screen name or?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. We had a really good battle. At least I enjoyed it. It plays from 2 up to 5. You might be able to get more people in there potentially if you really wanted to, but I think the game would slow to a crawl at that point. And it's meant to be a very fast-paced kind of borderline, insane kind of a game. The sweet spot would be 3 to 4. I think with 3 or 4 players, that is the most fun number. Not that you can't have fun with 2 or 5, because I think you can. But 3 to 4 is definitely the sweet spot.
Okay. What about the the variability of the game, like for the servant of the depths, as it were? How much variety are there? Are there different archetypes for the servant as well as for the players? Different abilities that they get? From some of the streams I've seen of you playtesting, it seems like the depths monster varies between encounters.
Yeah. So how you're asking me how much variability there is?
Yeah, like are there just different depths monsters, and they have do they have a what I guess, can you give some examples of, if there are differences, what are they between some of them?
Okay. Right. A great question. In terms of the variability of the game, the decks that you deck build, the shuffle build, as some games have called it, those can always be different, so you can create different combos as a delver. For the boards, for the terrain is super random and can change during the game. and almost certainly will change during the game. So as appropriate for the Depths, if you've read any of the lore of the Depths, or you've watched Mark's video from the Kickstarter about the Depths, you know, sometimes you'll leave a room and go back, and it'll be different from what you left behind. So that is mirrored in the board game, in that the terrain is constantly shifting, moving around, and changing, and often with a malevolent will, trying to get you. In terms of the monsters, so the Servant of the Depths, there are two of them that are fully designed right now. Okay. And we play tested with both of them. Now, you can actually play. Now, those decks are a complete deck in and of themselves. So they are kind of fully designed, because the monster has like an extra challenge. It's just one person versus a whole group of people. So the deck needs to be fine-tuned to make that, I don't know if I want to say an even fight, but a dramatically appropriate fight. Because a lot of different things can happen in this game. So those two monsters, one of them is designed, the Merchant is designed, the Merchant, which you may be familiar with if you've read the lore, is designed to really play with range. So a lot of his abilities have to do with like a short range card whose range you can increase to kind of hit all your opponents. You know, moving around and being able to buff range and then do damage based on range, that kind of thing. The other Servant of the Depths deck that's designed is the Sneaking Scorpion, which appears in the Great Depths Raid story, a lore story on our website, and that one is a a melee focused monster, a big awful scorpion thing with many mouths and eyes and multiple pincers, etc. And not only does it manipulate poison and have close range, but it's also very mobility focused. So very incentivized to rush in, hit hard, and rush out and try to get out of danger.
So each monster has a set of cards and a deck of abilities specific to them. More than are the abilities, like the Merchant abilities and the Scorpion abilities, interchangeable? That like you have your deck and you pick at random which abilities you're gonna have, or is it catered per servant rather than completely random by a draw of card?
It is catered by servant.
Okay.
Because again, the design of the servants, because they have that additional challenge, is very important. But in playtesting, I've found that lots of people, most people latch on to, like, if they play the servant, they latch on to one of them, and they're like, I just want to play this one.
This one.
And the game is hugely variable. It's different every single time, regardless of the deck you're playing, because the terrain shifts around. Terrain and the interplay between the terrain and the cards in your hand is so important and so variable that it's really very, very different. Sometimes the game will, just the whole thing will hinge on one space. Sometimes you're moving all over the board. There's a huge amount of variation.
Treville wanted to ask in chat how long it takes you to balance the monster out compared to the players, and I would add to that, what challenges have come up in not only balancing against the players, but also the varying amount of players that can be in the group, since it can be between 2 and 5.
No, that's a really cool. There's a pretty fun answer to that. So the number of players does have a big effect on the way the game plays. Not only is there a question of action economy, So the side with more players has way more actions to that they can do. But also just I guess just in terms of the sheer numbers involved as well. More HP, on the opposing side, because you win by wiping out the enemy, and various things like that. So there are two tools, and I think one of these actually existed when you tried. When you play tested with me, one of these existed and the other one did not. And the one that did exist is the mechanic of wounds, where you get you get your health is depleted as you take damage. When you hit 0, you take a wound, and that lets you reset your health dial to the maximum, or to the kind of standard 10, and then but now you're wounded, and if you go down to 0 again, you can't flip your wound token again, so you die. Now the Delvers all have one health or wound token. The Servant of the Depths gets a scaling mechanic, whereby they get an additional wound token, or they have a number of them equal to the number of Delvers in the game. So the more Delvers there are, the more HP the Servant has. So that's one aspect, right? That's one aspect. It
sounds like MMO bosses that have several health bars.
Right. So what often happens is, my cat just opened the door.
We're cat friendly here. It's okay.
Yeah, so mine walked in a minute ago.
So one thing that happens because of that is that at the start of the game, what will frequently occur is that the Delvers will just put a huge amount of pain onto the boss, but they can take it because they have so much HP. Now the other aspect, of balancing aspect there that I mentioned is the action economy aspect. So to help with that, I've devised a mechanic where there are event cards, and this represents the action of the Depths itself, trying to aid its servant in destroying the Delvers. And the event cards can be very powerful.
Yes, they can.
You saying that because you watched it, or did it actually?
I've watched it and I've experienced it. Yes.
Oh, okay. You also now the event cards, so that scales because each Delver gets one event card per turn. So the more players there are, the more event cards, the more Delvers there are, the more event cards are going to get triggered, if you follow me. And to kind of help with that, on top of that, is that there's the Maw token. And I know that didn't exist when you played Brand. So the thing is that the events, although they can be very powerful, sometimes because of timing and they're random, they don't have the punch that you would expect. So via this other token, there's a way that the servant, the person playing the boss monster, can bring back old events that have been played and trigger them again at a more powerful moment. So there's a lot of things going on there that are pretty quick to play. They're not things that slow down the game, except I guess having more HP means that it's just fairer. They don't really slow down the game, but they're very simple for everybody to play with, but they have a dramatic effect in terms of the balance. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. What can you tell us a little bit about the the Delver group composition, like just something about the player options. Are they what archetypes are available, and for the group, are they each able to pick any archetype, including duplicates, or is it kind of a preset arrangement of some sort?
I will answer as soon as I let the cat back out of my eye.
Sure. Can I add something to that question as well? If you can hear me, I know you have your headphones on there. When I played, the archetypes also kind of had a choice graphically of the different realms that existed between the three of them. Is that still part of the choices with archetypes? Like with racial stuff, there were races that were more oriented, obviously, to certain realms, but you weren't representing everything.
It's always possible that I might include more. But at this time, there are 4 archetypes available. And they are... Now, it would be really embarrassing if I mess this up, so I'm going to take my... They are Heavy Fighter, Mage, Devout, and Archer.
Okay.
And not only is there a lot of variance in the way those archetypes cards each interact with, like, the terrain effects and in various game situations, like depending on how far away you are. But also they combo very differently with various race decks. The races that are currently available, and again, I might add more. I'm not sure how things are going to work out. It depends on various factors. I will say that it's a huge amount of variance right now already. There are 6 races that you can choose from. And both your race and your archetype choice add 5 action cards into your deck. And the races are, there's 2 from each realm. And they are from the TDD, Lukarpan, and TDD Human. Vikings have Viking Human and Valkyrie. And Arthurians have Arthurian Human and Pict. But I should probably have I should probably say that there's not as much focus in the board game on splitting between realms, because this isn't an RVR game. Though in the board game is very intentionally set during a time period in the history of the world of Camelot Unchained, when the realms were in relative harmony, certainly not an open war, and could work together, especially in cases such as delving into the depths. So in the board game is set at a much earlier period of time than the video game.
Let's see. Does anybody else have any questions about how the gameplay is? About how the gameplay itself? That was it for me.
Just I guess maps. You've mentioned the environment. I've obviously played one of them. How many different maps, if there are multiple maps, do you intend to utilize to add that variance that we talked about?
I will answer that in a second, because I see Strike asked, can you all play the same class? Like, can you have 4 archers? No. There's one of each archetype, and there are 6 different races, which makes a lot of combinations.
And can you have a duplicate of races, or is it also a one of each?
One of each.
Okay.
So unique.
Okay. Unique race and unique class.
That's right.
Okay.
For the because you talked about the maps, is it a map style, or is it like, there's a game that I love that is called Subterra, which is tile based, rather than a big map? Is it more tile based, or is it a map that you can change depending on the environment?
Well, interestingly enough, it's both. So the when you say map,
like a board, a big board.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But when you say map, you're referring to the board itself, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now I'm working some things out. I'm not sure if it's going to work out with the manufacturing. I'd like to have like a number of double-sided boards that you can play. You know, they have like different arrangements of spaces on them.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. Right now there's just the one, but in all of the play testing that I've done, and not just I've done, but other other people who have taken the I've helped them make a prototype, and they play tested, when I wasn't there and stuff. Nobody has said that they actually needed like a totally different board.
Okay.
Even if they've played the game many times. And the reason is, I'd still like it. I'd still like to have it because I think that's cool. But the thing is that the terrain that you then put on the board changes around so much every single time. And even during the game, it can change around. That really... there's just it's different every time. There's a huge amount of tactical and strategic thought that you can put into each specific layout that comes up.
It really sounds like you even if you were to add multiple maps, at most you'd only even maybe want to add a couple, and then
maybe
even that's just for additional variability, maybe.
Additional variability, and
just to fit the theme.
Yeah. It would fit the theme exactly, precisely. I tried out a couple of different things as I was developing it. But where I've landed, I'm pretty happy with. So
let's if I can, let's talk about that a little bit. Can you tell us or give us an idea of your development process, and what that looks like in making a board game from scratch?
Oh, okay. I'm trying to figure out how to sum that up.
And maybe how it's changed from initial conception stages to now when you're refining things.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I mean, we already went over how the original concept of the game was this multiple hour kind of delve into the depths, and now it's focused down on like the best part. So that was a really big shift that happened in the middle of development, because I went through multiple iterations with the larger thing. I mean, I guess you know what? I'll try to quickly go over. Sorry, I just got an update about the baby from my wife. I'll just try to quickly go over the sort of main versions that I touched upon. I mean, there was a lot of iteration within each of these, but I think I'll go over the main versions to kind of answer that question. So when I first started out, and I first tried to come up with something to pitch to Mark, because I wanted to make a board game based on the Depths. It was a lot more like what's it called? Betrayal at House on the Hill. In terms of there were dangers, multiple tiles that you would go through, and they kind of like fit together and make like a map as you went. And each time you went on a tile, you'd encounter like some kind of challenge or danger. And there'd be like a little symbol on there that would tell you what it was. It was a very, very simple kind of, roll dice, play cards, and try not to die kind of thing. And I pitched it to Mark, and he liked it, but he was like, "You needed to think bigger. You need to think more epic. Think epic." So I started doing that. And I'd say the next sort of main big version was something where and this lasted a long time, is that there were big tiles and that you would place down, encountering terrain and dangers on them as you went, and that they would have like NPC monsters on them. And the NPC monsters would have like AI decks, essentially, where you draw like an attack from the top of them and apply its effects to you. And that was pretty fun, but also not as much strategy and tactics involved. Pretty much, move forward, try to do stuff. And it took a while to play. It was fun. It just... it wasn't necessarily as cool as where it is now. And that's when I started working out the idea that somebody would become corrupted and eventually turn into, would become corrupted and like secretly work against everybody else. And that led to like there being a monster in the final battle at the end. And that led to, okay, like to make that balanced, then we kind of have to reset the board after somebody becomes the monster. Because otherwise it's just like, oh, hey, I think I'm going to end up being so corrupted I become the monster. I'll just kill everyone while it's easy. And so that was happening a lot. And many iterations within that before where it is now, where I transitioned to a focusing on the boss fight essentially, and the 1 versus X game, and now within this version, there have been a few different iterations, but that has emerged as the most fun thing for sure. And it plays a lot faster, and within it there's a lot of strategy, tactics, and thought and crazy happenstance on top of it that for you to enjoy. Does that about cover it?
I think so. Yeah.
Cool.
For those of us who watch Morning with Max pretty regularly, most of us are aware that you are a pretty big D&D fan, and you run your own D&D campaigns. You're a GM. How has designing for that area of tabletop element transition to help you with designing for a board game professionally?
Oh man. What do you mean? How is it transitioned? Like
creating and design aspects, D&D with combat encounters and balancing numbers, transition into the thought process of creativity with creating a board game from scratch.
Yeah. Man, that's like a really simple question with a really
complicated answer.
A really deep answer, potentially. I mean, I think a lot of that's hard to quantify. Yes, D&D and tabletop RPGs have been a big part of my life for a long time. I think my thoughts on that stuff are constantly evolving. definitely inspires me to make that to give that feeling of discovery, of playing as a I guess a character, of overcoming a danger as a group, overcoming a challenge as a team. Definitely all things that appear in the Depths board game.
Or killing a whole group. Or we're still for D&D.
Or betraying your friends and slaughtering them all.
It sounds like it's maybe definitely influenced more directly some of the earlier versions of the game, like the long form exploration version is very much like a D&D dungeon delve sort of concept.
Yeah. I would have to say yes to that. More like what's it called? Journeys in the Dark, Descent. Which is a game again where it's like somebody takes on the role of the bad guy and like plays all the monsters, and such. But I guess you could say at times I've had to kind of use my D&D experience to say, well, no, this isn't that. No, this isn't an RPG. This is a board game, and it works differently and intentionally so.
Yeah. What have been some ways? I mean, we've kind of already touched on this a little bit with some of the elements, like, for instance, the variability of the map, and the terrain. But what are some ways that you've tried to, or considered trying more to build the atmosphere of the depths into the game?
Well, a large part of that has been working with the incredible artists that I have the honor and the privilege of working with every day. Kara Stover and Michelle Davies, both amazing. Kara has made, with Michelle's assistance and advice, all of the art of the game, all the cards, the board, the terrain tokens, just so much cool stuff that has she's worked really hard on. And sometimes I've said, no, this isn't working. Especially when she first started working on the board game with me. We had to be like, no, this isn't the right feel. We got to try something completely different, and then start over again from scratch to get that kind of Giger, that fantasy Giger feel, which is, I think, very much what we're going for. And I think in terms of the art, gosh, it feels really, really good. And
that's good to hear. Especially, I'm a huge fan of anything alien. So, including, of course, obviously, all Giger's art influences in that videos in that movie series. So
that movie series, cool.
Franchise, that's the word I wanted. For some reason, the word franchise escaped me at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not copying or anything like that. It's it's stealing what we can use, and
it's inspired
gloriously, and inspired by a fantasy kind of, because Gear's very sci-fi. Even his fantasy is kind of sci-fi. And this is the depths. In terms of the design, there's a couple of different things. One thing that was important to me from pretty early on in the design process, not the very earliest version, which, oh boy, that was not good. But when I hit upon the idea of using blood to power everything, because that, I think, taps into the horror theme. Am I still coming through?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, my headphones are funky. The taps into the horror theme by using blood to power things. I think it's very appropriate for the depths. It ties into the Camelot Unchained, blood being a resource aspect, and it also is intentionally, I think, designed to be a little more painful than resources in a lot of board games. Like, unlike, say, Magic the Gathering, where you like take this is getting a little noodly, but you put your lands down or whatever, and you get mana. Mm-hmm. In the Depths board game, like, blood is in your deck and it stays in your hand, and it's a thing that is very present for you. And so that I wanted to keep that, and I think it's effective in especially when I've got 3 players around the table with me saying, I have too little blood, I need more blood. or I have too much blood, and then things get really interesting. Okay. So one thing that
sounds very Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, Darkest Dungeon, yeah. So stuff like that.
Okay. I actually meant to ask this earlier. What do you envision coming in the game itself with regards to the the characters and the monsters? Are any of them like miniatures? Are they all just tokens? What does that arrangement look like?
Well, still working out the manufacturing details.
Yeah,
that's what I'm actively working on these days. Very much so. They will be miniatures, and we're gonna have our wonderful 3D artist John probably work on some awesome stuff.
Wonderful.
I mean, I want to get as many miniatures and have them be as cool and as high quality as possible.
Cool.
In the game, so I'm
making them. They will be
minis. You may be able to see my minis collection here in the background. That's what those drawers are all full of.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure you can have too many minis, but I recently got a Kickstarter board game that had like literally 3 panels of miniatures, all of which had to be just opened and pulled out. And by the end of it, I was like, okay, this game may have too many minis.
No, there's never too many minis.
I have 3 boxes of these things. Like, each box has
under
3
one
panels,
condition: if you don't have to paint them all.
And 2
packs of that's these things. Too many minis. Well, I'd like to go back to a bit to the inspiration, because we don't know yet a lot about the how far in development the depth are for CU itself. But have you taken into as inspiration from the ideas from CU, or is it a back and forth and the board game has given some ideas to the devs for the game itself, or is it more you that's taken inspiration from what the ideas are for the CU depths?
Definitely more me taking inspiration from the depths. The depths, in terms of Camelot Unchained, and I want to stay on the topic of the board game, but
sure.
It's not something that they've been working on. It's not part of Beta 1. As excited as everyone in the studio is about the depths, we know we have to build the foundation before the house. Hey, we're moving along great. I don't know if you've seen the latest news update.
We have.
But
we follow them.
Those of you in Twitch chat reading this later, I don't know if you've seen our latest news update, or newsletter, which also went out this Friday. But if you haven't, go and check it out, because there's a lot of really cool progress that we're making, just not on the depths.
Some good images too. I threw some of those up in our guild Discord for people that don't follow the newsletter like they should.
I mean, it's easier. It should be, I think, easier to follow the newsletter than the weekly news updates.
Yeah, I read both, but some people I know never. They're like, I can't be bothered.
And to kind of follow up Chris's question, then, when that time comes where the depth starts getting work done on it for CU, will it, do you think, take inspiration from your work on the board game element, or are you both now at this point just drawing from the same source?
You know, it's tough for me to say. I wouldn't be the you know, I don't know whether I'll be involved in that or not. But if I am, then yes. If I'm not, then I don't really know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't really. You'd have to ask. You'd have to ask Ben probably.
Okay.
Yeah. The kind of changed tact here a little bit. Strike a little while ago wanted to know if there was any chance the board game might be available on a virtual tabletop simulator at some point, or on stream at least.
I mean, that would be awesome. It's not something I'm actively working toward at the moment, but I love Tabletop Simulator, and you know, I think there's so much cool stuff you can do with it, and it would be great to, you know, let people play without being in person.
Yeah.
On that note, I actually had this question which ties into that. We're seeing a trend, I think, in my opinion, where a lot of physical games, board games, are seeing a more mobile approach to them for phone games and internet, just connectivity. Is there any intent to turn this into a device or a handheld type game?
If so, we haven't discussed it.
I mean, it does seem like, especially with the new, you know, kind of just focus on the 1vx mechanic of it, it does seem like something that could very easily be adapted to that sort of platform.
Yeah, definitely. And to go back, well, kind of to take further on the Steam part, what are you thinking of doing for the publishing of the game? Are you thinking of publishing in-house, maybe doing a Kickstarter to be able to publish it? Or have you not really discussed that yet?
As we said in the presentation, which we published in December, the plan is to most likely do a Kickstarter for the board game. Yeah, put it out ourselves, and see what happens.
This actually is a good moment for Grimslag's earlier question. He had asked kind of for, I guess, what stage of development you feel like the game is at. You know, what are you where are you at in terms of, I guess, producing and looking at marketing and production and all that sort of things for it? It's been a bit, so I don't remember the exact verbiage of his question now, but
actively working on it. You know, getting you know, talking to various manufacturers, getting quotes, you know, figuring out how this stuff works, quite frankly, and the like.
Okay. I only have one other question left, so I'm gonna open this up for y'all, and of course chat as well if y'all have any other questions, because I was gonna save mine for last because it's only semi-related. But
all right.
Brand, Kriss, did either you have any others?
I do. Another development question.
Okay.
I know several months ago you reached out to the CU community in large to request help for beta testing. This was way after I think I even had the privilege of doing it. My question is, how successful was that, and how influenced were those tests with the community players and developing it to today?
Really successful and really helpful. Some of you wonderful backers drove like for hours to come and play test the game on a weekend with me, and for that I am eternally grateful. And you are greatly appreciated. Other folks who just, you know, were in the area were able to make time for weekend. Very few people played once and never came back. Most of them wanted to play again and again and again, and then I changed something, and then they had to start all over. They were super great playtesters, and the community really stepped up. Some people, people would come over and in the game store, a local game store we test in, and it was called Comics and Gaming, but they changed their name. I think they're called Paradise now. The people would come over and just kind of like check it out, like, oh, this is a game and being play tested, or they'd say, what are these chicken scratches? This is the art of this game. Wow, terrible. That was before Kara drew anything, and it was all my stuff in that's paint. Yeah. And I mean, people contributed a lot. People, I think, not the way that it ended up, but like a lot of the development of like the event cards and the MAW card, the MAW token, was like suggested to me by somebody that playtested the game. It was like, hey, why don't you do this? And what if it worked this way? And yeah, that comes up all the time. I mean, also with playtesting people in the office, which I did a lot of. I think all of like most of last year, I was running playtests once or twice every week. On the weekend, I'd do it with backers and folks in the game store. The next week, I'd do it over a lunch break in the office with coworkers, and people would just suggest stuff all the time, and every now and then a real gem would kind of be like, yes, this can fix a design problem if I tweak it. So I hope that answers your question, Brand.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. It's awesome to hear.
All right. Kriss, Brand, anything else? Chat. It's your last call.
I got one more, but I'll let Kriss go.
No, go ahead. I'm because most of the questions I've answered mine, so I'm trying to come up with a new one.
Okay. This is kind of a see you in large question. With designing the board game, and then your position in all the other elements of being part of CSE, is there any intent for this to transition into being more of a designer role in CU and helping Ben and Mark with future elements of the actual MMO game?
I guess we'll see what happens.
I was about to say, I don't know that he can answer that question.
It was just a hopeful question, but very neutral and fair answer.
I'll just say I'd be open to that.
Okay.
Kriss, did you have any?
No, just for me, it's more of a general question. How did it feel to see right now from going from your first ID to right now being fairly close to production? How does it feel to see your ID coming to fruition? Because it's a much shorter process than a video game, and you saw the ID. You started with your ID, and you followed it all the way to almost production now. How does it feel to see that process, basically?
How does it feel? It's an incredible feeling. I would say it feels like an accomplishment by me and by really everyone at everyone that worked on any of these ideas, artists and Mark with his concepts, and play testers that help along the way. It feels like a lot of things came together to make it this far, and I can't wait to see what happens.
Great. I don't see any other questions in chat. I do have one. I always like to end these episodes with kind of a softball or a fluffy question. Whether it's an interview or just our normal episodes, I always like to try to come up with one kind of off the wall question at the end. And so, I know that you're, as we've kind of mentioned, you're a big fan of D&D, and all three of us are also really big tabletop fans. So, at any point working on this, have you ever just sat down and thought, Camelot Unchained, the tabletop game?
Yeah. Was in fact a few years ago we were gonna try to get a Camelot Unchained themed D&D game going on stream. We never quite managed to make that happen.
That would be fun.
But it would be really, really fun. Yeah, of course.
Strike did have anher good question here.
I was about to say.
Can we play the game in a tavern in CU in the future?
That'd be. I hope so.
CU minigame.
CU minigame.
I am a fan of minigames, so
that'd be sick.
Sarah has a good one. Not board game related, but
D&D related.
What's your favorite? Yeah, what's your favorite race class combo in D&D?
I think I've asked this legitimate question on Morning with Max at some point.
Are you like me and it's just too hard to pick one?
It is too hard to pick one. So I guess the question is whether it's favorite by most played or most interested in.
Probably most interested in, because I know that I've played a million of certain classes because no one wants to, except me.
I guess Elf Wizard is definitely the one I have when I get to be a player, which is not all that often.
I feel you.
The DM curse.
Yeah, I mean I love DMing, but when I get to look at things from the other side of the screen, I guess Elf Wizard. I think aren't all dungeon masters like default wizard? I mean, I'm not sure that I'm that.
I also suffer from not getting to play quite as much as I would like usually, though we've got a pretty good group going now online where we alter it up a little, we vary it up some, fortunately, but I always have the problem of like when I'm not DMing, I'm usually playing a cleric or something because no one else wants to heal, and I'm sitting there the whole time going, one day I'm going to play a wizard. One day.
I have played a cleric, but I think I played that cleric as if it was a wizard, pretty much. I don't know how noodly you want me to get, but it was in 3.5. They did allow complete divine, and I took the divine meta magic feats, and I'm just gonna say, can we cuss on your show?
Oh yeah.
We do it.
Shit got crazy.
Yeah, I need to try to get off my usual rogue archetype. I vary the race, but the class is really different.
No, that's good. That's tough. Rogue, like wizard, has a lot of different ways you can play it.
Yes.
Off of that, Max, you have recently started streaming pretty heavily on your own private Twitch account, D&D related stuff.
That's right.
If that were to not ever interfere with the development of CU, would you then consider doing a CU inspired D&D world with the Office folks?
Sure, why not? Yeah, you're talking about twitch.tv/supercommoner, where I am planning to stream my D&D session right after this.
Exactly. So you would consider picking up the idea that you guys have all talked about already, doing the CU D&D, but on a more maybe serious note. Would it present itself?
Of course I would consider it. I don't know. We haven't really worked out anything like that for for my own channel, but Mark has certainly given his blessing on the Camelot Unchained channel. If we're putting together, it's just a matter of like, if everyone in the office is busy, has time and etc. Can be prohibitive. And a lot of folks in the office, like, they're aware of like D&D, but not all of them play. And a lot of them know like D&D stuff, but they're not necessarily like up on 5th edition, etc.
Yeah,
I actually the last time I've played D&D was 3.5, so it's been a while.
Oh yeah, well there you go.
I tried on 4th and I didn't like it.
Yeah, it was okay. At any rate, I guess we've kind of diverged from the tabletop topic because we're out of questions really at this point. Is there anything else you wanted to add or just say about the board game before we kind of close off for the night?
Anything else I wanted to say about the board game to the world at large? I hope you folks have as much fun with it as I have, and as all my playtesters have. It's really fun when you just kind of see where the craziness takes you, and if getting killed is definitely part of the fun.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, again, I want to thank Max for joining us and talking about the board game. We're all three of us are board game lovers and tabletop lovers, so we're more than excited for it. And I want to thank everybody else, of course, for coming and hanging out with us. And again, apologize for the delays, but thank you for hanging out and waiting for us to get everything set up and get started. As usual, we will, of course, be back in 2 weeks for our next episode. I don't know what the topic is going to be yet, but we'll post something and let you know. And if you're watching this recording later on YouTube, like, subscribe, leave us a comment.
Leave us a comment.
Check out CSE Camelot Unchained, actual MMO as well.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And we'll see you all later.
All right, see you later.